Ben Zand, welcome to PoliticsJOE.
Thank you so much.
We're here to talk about your latest documentary, but before that, can you introduce yourself?
Yeah, I'm Benjamin Zand. I'm a documentary maker, journalist, man who likes to meet interesting individuals.
Man about town.
Yeah.
Professional man about town. We're here to talk about your latest documentary, Transmaxxing, Life Uncovered, which is available on Channel 4 this evening. I doubt the audience will be familiar with what Transmaxxing is. What is Transmaxxing?
I mean, I suppose from how I've interpreted it, it's an extension of Luxmaxxing, which I'm also making a documentary about. And it's kind of this idea that you're trying to kind of become the upscaling yourself in some way, and either by some people will redefine their jaw, or they'll, if they're going to soft max, they'll go to the gym, something quite simple to try and change their opinion. I mean, their appearance to be the kind of, most attractive version of themselves. Transmaxxing kind of takes that and says, okay, well, there's a kind of manifesto that, and the idea is, well, some men are actually just more attractive as women. So they might not feel like a woman, or, have gender dysmorphia, or kind of sensibility that they were born in the wrong body. They just think that they actually genetically are more attractive physically as a woman. So they're a man that starts to kind of transition to be a woman solely for kind of sexual reasons.
And they talk about the other benefits that can be reaped from being a woman, one of which was cheaper car insurance.
Yeah, cheaper car insurance. Yeah. And
the manifesto is worth a read for those interested in it as well. As a point of curiosity, not as a handbook, I would say, but it's pretty extraordinary.
Yeah, and people buying you cheaper drinks at a bar was one of them, for example. That kind of, I suppose, really stereotypical kind of male-female roles. The kind of manifesto suggests that, should you kind of transition as a woman, you'll kind of get those benefits. And although you might not feel like a woman, in most cases they don't. It actually, the manifesto specifically says, it's not for people who feel as though they're in the wrong body. It's for people who kind of want to game the system, which is obviously very controversial.
It's also, it's like, it seems to discredit trans identity at all, in that sense. I think it seems to, like, this is a choice and we're doing it for our benefits. And I think a trans colleague watched it and was like, this completely alienates, or this the existence of this transmaxxing ideology they took it as an affront to their identity. And they also I think it's such a bizarre thing, because you can't really wrap your head around why someone would take such extreme steps for such kind of incremental gains. How did you come across the ideology?
From making a film about incels. I think we spoke about that film.
Yeah.
I'm also making a documentary about Luxmaxxing, which we kind of briefly covered. It's kind of like, going down the rabbit hole and just kind of finding one thing and then finding another thing and then finding another thing. Through Luxmaxxing, which, through the incel doc I made, there's a guy in that who kind of was hammering his face, and he was kind of mewing and putting his tongue in specific positions in his mouth to try and change his jawline. And some people get leg lengthening done, and one aspect of that is like is the idea that kind of some men kind of can't really Luxmax because maybe they are smaller, or they have more feminine tones, and for them to kind of become their more supreme self, it's actually better for them to just look like a woman, because they'll get actually better sexual interactions in that way. And it's a kind of very it's controversial because of that idea, which is that it's not saying transition because say you feel like a woman, or this is something that you struggled with. It's purely a kind of tactical move to say that I'm going to have more opportunity in my love life by looking like a woman.
So in your documentary, you go and visit a transmaxxer called Sammy. What did you expect a transmaxxer to be like, and what did Sammy meet those expectations?
So I expected a transmaxxer to be kind of somebody who was completely Machiavellian and was just kind of I suppose, slightly, maybe, I don't know, taking the mick out of it, or I don't know, odious in some way. I'd say Sammy wasn't. I mean, I quite liked them. We spent time together. They seemed like somebody, as many of these, I suppose, more conspiratorial ideas that come into the world, who was just kind of misguided, or perhaps using it as a kind of, maybe they were on their own trans journey and they were kind of using this as their reasoning. It's so complicated. There's a kind of scene in the film where we go through the kind of Transmaxxing manifesto, which is wild, as you said, read it, and the kind of points in it are just, even like the testimony in it of like, there's bit in the film where I'm kind of laughing my head off, and I'm not laughing at anything beyond, it's just absurd. It's a guy who's talking about the fact that he's really, I think he's small. He's got like a tiny penis. That's how kind of specific it is. He's got like a micro penis. And that was the kind of decision making, is that if I have a micro penis and I'm small, then it makes sense for me to become a woman. That's the only option I have because I'm more feminine.
There was a hierarchy of options for incels, basically. And the Transmaxxing manifesto, you'd expect to say number one choice. It ranges from the best thing you can do is medically transition to being a woman, and then the worst option is suicide. And in between those, there's like sex crimes, zoophilia, etc., which I think really shows the headspace of the author.
It does, and I think like it shows the headspace of that world, which I kind of found this when doing the incel doc as well, which is like it is just actually quite upsetting a lot of the time, because like it's loads of men who are trying to kind of find themselves, trying to find their place in the world, and they kind of often don't have a huge amount of friends in the real world and a huge amount of interaction, and they find themselves on these forums, and the forums start telling them that they have the answers to the world's problems. And they're these really extreme kind of solutions that make absolutely no sense. And yeah, quite often it's either do this insanely radical thing or kill yourself. It's like, they're the only option you have. Your life is just over already unless you kind of take these paths. And it is tricky, for me to get my head around.
And if you don't have a strong social network in real life to tell you that, then it just reinforces. If everyone if all the anonymous people you're communicating with are telling you these are the only two options, and there's no one in reality that you can speak to, a romantic partner, a close friend, you maybe don't have the best relationship with your family, you can't see how you can empathize with like how people get themselves into these headspaces.
Totally, yeah. And I think, I always try and come at it from a point of empathy. Like I'm not actually going in there to ruin lives at all. It's actually the opposite. I'm trying to say, look, these people exist. They kind of operate on the fringes of society. They think that they're onto something. First of all, are they? Let's talk to them about it. And then secondly, if not, why are they thinking like this? And I'd say, yeah, quite often it's like they're lost, and because they spend so much time in these forums, they've actually, and they don't have kind of positive role models around them, or they don't have people that they can actually talk to. They're not going to therapy. They actually just lose grip on reality. And I've had it where I'm actually with somebody, and they're telling me a version of the world that is just patently not true if you look around, and then they get so upset because you won't kind of conform to that idea. And they don't get upset in a way that, they're trying to have an argument with you. They get upset in a way that they truly believe it, because they've been so brainwashed into thinking that way. And then when you don't kind of take on board what they're saying, it's kind of like the house of cards is crashing down, and they're so upset about it. So it's just, it's really sad. Really.
Yeah, it's really sad. I was going to come onto this later, but there is all these phenomena. Like, people talk about a crisis of masculinity. I think there was a piece in a newspaper today on the day of filming about why young men are right-wing or turning to right-wing ideologies or extreme ideologies. Like Andrew Tate's the most popular person in the world. There's incels, there's transmaxers, there's lookmaxers. Why do you think there is this crisis of people? Because I think, 40 years ago, people didn't have these. Your role model would have been, I don't know, someone in The Cure or somebody. It wouldn't be like an anonymous person who'd written a 100-page manifesto. Do you think how much do you think these online communities play into it? And do you think there's a solution to this? Do you think there's a balm to this?
I mean, I think there's a lack of kind of direction for a lot of people. I think there's a lot of people feel very lonely and they feel disconnected from the wider world, and they're not entirely sure of what direction their lives should take, and they don't have kind of positive role models en masse. They just have kind of social media influencers a la Andrew Tate or somebody kind of offering them like a get rich quick scheme and telling them that the kind of secret to manliness is to be strong and aggressive and to kind of make trillions of dollars. And the reality is, that's very difficult to achieve. I think for a long time, I think a lot of men have been told by, that they are being, kind of pushed to the side and criticized, and kind of they feel out of place. And I feel in the absence of a clear direction, they are finding, individuals like Andrew Tate. I think that whether there's a solution to it, I mean, for me, the solution is to just have my own kind of principles and values. I read a lot of Stoicism, and I look at kind of back in ancient Rome, they had philosophy of life schools where you'd kind of look at who you want to be and what you want to be. And like my philosophy is trying to just, be a nice guy, leave people's lives better than how I kind of entered them, and kind of, treat people well. I think but I don't know how you roll that out on a kind of a wider scale. I just know that the answer isn't kind of falling deep into internet hellholes. Yeah. I think it's about kind of community and reconnection. I think obviously there's a lot of mental health issues that people don't address, and instead of actually seeking out help, they'll seek out some random person on the internet who's just chats a bit of poo. I'd actually say that is a major problem, which is people are disconnected because they're on the internet a lot. They don't have huge social circles. Maybe they've left school and they haven't got people around them. They then start to feel down and depressed, and they have issues. And instead of seeking out actual support, such as therapy, men's mental health is something that's spoken out a lot, or talking to people openly and having an actual space to do that, they instead dive into the internet. And usually it'll start with one Google of why do I feel like this? And it might be one bit of support because they found a forum on Discord or something or whatever that people are saying, I also feel like this. So there's that kind of sense of, I now feel, I feel a shared sense of belonging. But the problem is the next stage beyond that is, well, actually, the reason you feel like that is actually because you're just not attractive enough. It's not because you have, some addressed issue from your childhood that makes you feel, abandonment or whatever. It's actually just because your physical appearance isn't quite right. So if you do these things, then you'll feel fine. And they fall into that conspiracy, and then it kind of extends into a whole other world, which is actually, well, men and women have specific roles. You need to fill that role as a man. And then it just gets darker and darker and darker. So I think people need to address their problems prior to going down this route.
It's interesting as well because incels, or people within the incel universe, I guess, it's always about, I'm not attractive because I'm 5'2", overweight, I'm spotty, or whatever. But lots of my friends are very nice people. They might not be the most handsome person in the world, but they're sexually active because they're nice people. They're friendly. It's something there should be a crusade of someone to go into every incel forum and say, just be nicer, and you might get laid.
Yeah, because I suppose
self-pity and wallowing.
I mean, there's two things to this. One is that there is data that proves that if you're more attractive, life is a bit easier.
Yeah.
That's true. But then I think they take that and just take it too far, because I've met many incels, and they are not ugly. Yeah. They're good-looking people, quite often, and I think it's as you said, if you're somebody who's got, who's trying hard, they've got their stuff together, you're trying to build something, you have a kind of growth mindset, and you're trying to, address your issues, people will respond to that, and you'll find love eventually. And if you actually put yourself out there, and quite often with incels, you meet them and it's they're not, they're not engaging with the outside world. They're not going outside. They're trying things like luxmaxing or transmaxing instead of just actually meeting people. And then they can't quite connect the fact that if you're not going out, meeting people, making an effort, then obviously you're not going to have any interactions with people. So it's not, it's kind of like it was a non-starter because you never actually made that effort in the first place. It's kind of easier to fall into the forums in a way.
Yeah, I suppose because if they turn up looking like Chad, they've luxmaxed to the nth degree, they've got their chiseled jawline, they've done their leg lengthening, and then they've got no chat, or they've got all they've got to talk about is their luxmaxing and leg lengthening surgery.
Yeah, and it's like a mask, isn't it? It's like, if you it might work for a few seconds, but you kind of just need to work on yourself, and kind of, as you said, get the chat. And the chat isn't like some Andrew Tate style chat where like you talk in a really specific way and everyone's going to love you. It's just like learning to interact with people in like a reasonable way, which you're not kind of trying to screw them over and they're not trying to screw you over, and you're just being genuine. It's like, and that's the thing, which is like they don't want to be themselves because they don't like themselves, but they're nice people underneath the conspiracy. That's the thing, is like, and it's not that I'm saying I'm not like advocating for incels. I'm just saying like they just quite often just troubled young people,
vulnerable, very vulnerable,
and really vulnerable, who have fell into these horrible ideologies. Like with anybody, I spend my life meeting kingpins and drug lords and criminals. It's quite often similar. It's similar. These are like kind of people who come from really troubled backgrounds who have just fallen into this thing, and like and they've now started to assume that that's the only way they can live, and everyone around them thinks like that, and they've lost grip. So it's, I mean, how you pull them back is another question. I don't know.
It's also the anonymity of the inceldom and the manifestos. Like I think about like QAnon. Q's just a guy. Q's just a guy who made up QAnon. And I wonder if with the Transmaxxing manifesto, it could well just be a prank by like a malicious actor who's written all this and said they could have completely, because the author's anonymous, the author's name is for like Vertigo or something like that. And then you go along with it, and you're trapped in the wrong body, all because someone online said it would make you feel happier. The costs of it are quite remarkable.
No, they are, and I think it's I suppose whether or not there's a whole conversation around this kind of that has become a major culture war issue. But I think I think in this instance, these aren't people who are saying that they're born in the wrong body. They're people who are saying that they didn't feel attractive as a man. And I think, like, as you said, to struggle with all these things is like, it could just be a bit of a prank, like, because there's so much of that kind of trolling within these forums. Or it could have been probably was someone in a really bad place themselves, who is just kind of regurgitating all of the kind of horrible thoughts that they were told from other people. They've put it into this thing that makes it look official. It seems like a step-by-step plan. And like, where does that end up? Like, what are the consequences? And I think, the other side of it is that, and I think maybe this is kind of maybe Sammy's story, or at least part of it, which is, I think some people can use it as part of their actual story of feeling as though they were in the wrong body, and I think like, and that was the question I had whilst making it, was like, are they men who are just pretending to be women to get sexual gratification? Are they people who are actually, who feel trans but kind of can't admit it, and they're using this as a cover? And I guess it's very difficult to know.
Yeah, I think that was the from watching it, I kind of got the impression that Sammy was using it as a crutch on their own journey, I suppose. And I kind of think I think regardless of what the like black pilled you are, or red pilled, or whatever level of pilled you are as an incel, to go through the actual procedures involved requires such a deep level of brainwashing. I do think it'd be very hard to do that if you didn't have some level of gender dysphoria. And also, I think the manifesto is incredibly dishonest about the experience of being a trans woman in this country. Regardless of whether or not you are a transmaxer, you will be perceived as a trans woman, and trans women face a hugely disproportionate amount of violence. They're stigmatized And there's also that element of it as well, which I think is dangerous for the transmaxers themselves for putting themselves in that situation, perhaps unnecessarily. And I also think it could be dangerous for trans people, because transmaxing as an ideology, if someone is aware of that identity, any trans woman can therefore be accused of being, oh, you're not real when you're a transmaxer. Was that something that you had in mind when you were?
Yeah, and I think, it's it was definitely a show we thought a lot about, and I think it's kind of controversial in every possible way. It's kind of offensive to women, because it's the idea that like life's just easier as a woman, and like you just like which many people would make some very strong cases for why that's not true.
It's true, the comments will be.
Yeah, exactly. So it's kind of as you said, it's kind of problematic for the trans community, because people could then use that as a kind of to write off their experience. So I think it's obviously tricky. I think everything I do is tricky and really difficult, and obviously we have to think about why are we doing this, and I think at the end of the day, I'm a guy who believes that these things exist and they are growing in the darkest depths of the internet, and kind of challenging them and exposing them is the best way to kind of address it. And you can pretend loads of things don't exist, but they do, and it doesn't matter just because you pretend they don't. So I think there's a value in it, and as I said, I see my role in this really as not having. I try not my best to not have any opinions. Sometimes I may seem as though I do. I really try not to in these scenarios. At the end of the day, it's just like people live their lives in a trillion ways. It's like I'm not certain about which ones are correct, but like I'm trying to be like the kind of middle ground, the kind of just back and forth. I'm always trying to be the devil's advocate in those scenarios. And I think there's actually a big audience for that at the moment, because everything is so freaking polarized. You just have loads of people pretending they know what they're talking about, and they don't, because they haven't really experienced the world. So it's like I'm not actually pretending I know what I'm talking about. I don't at all. I'm just trying to be somebody who can like elicit some information from somebody, kind of challenge them a little bit, and then say to the audience, all right, take it as you will. Like my tagline on I think on social media is like I make documentaries and then people send me offensive messages on the internet.
I could actually,
which is basically exactly what happens each time. But quite often also you do get a lot of messages saying, "Oh wow, this has raised my I didn't know this existed."
Yeah. Is there anything that you particularly want to cover that you have been able to yet? You spent some time in some interesting company. Do you have like a white whale of a community or a person that you'd love to spend some time with?
Well, we've just made one about psychics that actually came out yesterday, which was like a big topic, and like kind of mystics and psychics is something I'm always really interested in. I just think, for me, like masculinity, conspiracies, kind of supernatural, like that will always be what I want to do in the trillion guises that it kind of comes out. You know what I mean? There's not any kind of specific thing. There's loads of things that I'd love to do, and just kind of really it's people that I want to meet. That's kind of usually how it works. I'll see somebody and be like, I really would love to know why they think that's correct. Like religion's fascinating to me, like an extreme religion, like Scientology and all that. It's just very interesting how you get people who believe really hardcore things genuinely, and I think it's like meeting those people who are convinced that they have the secret to the world's ills. And I'm just like, okay, like tell me about it. Like and I say this in the psychic film that's just come out, I say to the guy, like, if you can actually talk to dead people, that's like absolutely incredible. That will literally change the foundation of existence. So it's like, if you can
settle every argument.
I know, it'd be amazing. So it's like, and I know a lot of people truly believe they can. So it's like, if you can, that's amazing. So I kind of go into it like, please convince me, because I don't know why I'm here. I don't know the meaning of life. I wish I did. I've been searching for it my whole life. I can't figure it out. So loads of people think they do. So it's just like, prove it to me. And if you can, I am an acolyte. I will follow you. I'm your disciple for the rest of time. Up until this point, they haven't, I suppose.
Yeah. I never thought about how small time mediums are. Or being like, they just do like stage shows. Not like at the UN, being like,
I know, exactly.
Like I've spoken to Nelson Mandela.
If you had that actual capacity,
super, you could solve every world conflict.
Literally everything. Yeah. And it's like, I always, the thing where it's like, I suppose the difficulty is just like, nothing is that simple, is it? You know, there's nothing that is just like, yes, I now have the answer.
Yeah.
Because everything's so convoluted. And I always think when you see somebody, transmaxes as well, like who's purporting to have the answer, really simple thing. Okay, just become a woman, even though you feel you're actually a man and you feel like a man, and then your answers will be solved. It's obviously not correct. You know, the world's more complicated than that. There isn't just a kind of golden bullet that just says, cool, this is it, you know.
Yeah. Well, on that note, sure, leave it there.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Ben Zand, thanks for coming in, and congrats on the documentary. Available on Channel 4 now.